you're here, then a part of you knows that you are more than your to-do list. A part of you also knows that you are a spiritual being in a very modern, noisy, and distracting world. You know that you have so much potential inside of you, but trying to imagine or envision getting that outside of yourself and impacting the world in a positive way and improving your day-to-day life, envisioning that just seems impossible. And part of that's because you don't even know exactly what it is that you want. What I'm describing here is autopilot mode with a side of burnout. And if you're still here, I imagine that this is something that you are experiencing on the day-to-day. And inside this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 strange, unusual strategies that I used to break out of autopilot mode and create the life that I want to live. And I'm going to share those with you here inside this video. My name is Emily Rose. I am a full-time business owner. I do card readings for folks with Lenormand and tarot. I also teach tarot readers and the mystically minded to read Lenormand cards like they're talking to a friend. My life was definitely very different from this about 5 to 8 years ago or so. I was working a full-time, I call it muggle job, and I was experiencing all the same things that I just described. That's how I am so intimately acquainted with autopilot mode. What I'm going to share with you here are the ways that I kind of broke out of autopilot mode to create the life that I wanted to live. Now, this life may not make sense to other people, but it's exactly the type of life that I want to live. I have a wonderful family. I make a living doing what I love. I have fabulous clients, and I'm just really excited about my life. So I'm going to share with you 5 of the ways that I broke out of that going to work autopilot mode to creating the life I want to live. And I did this while having a chronic illness, while working a full-time job. It's something that I made time for, but it's very doable if you are working full-time, if you have a busy life, if you have a family. These are all tips that you can do really quickly. They aren't things that you have to, set aside days and days and days and days to do. It is not your fault that you are in autopilot mode. I want to just say that because we can kind of shame ourselves. I know I did. I was thinking, gosh, why am I not doing what I want to do? I don't even know what I want to do. What the heck is wrong with me? And I promise not to get on a big soapbox here, but our society is designed for you to go into autopilot mode. It is. Also, our brains really like little boxy routines. We like to do the same things every day. We prefer to have things that are predictable, and we are designed to not really take risks. That's how our brain functions. So we have all these factors that are kind of working towards us staying in the same routine. And it is going to take conscious effort for you to kind of break out of this autopilot mode. But you can intentionally break out of the cycle and create the life that you want to live. I'm proof of that here, and I see a lot of my clients breaking this cycle as well. I'll share with you these 5 unusual tips to break out of autopilot mode. I want to say that this is not a substitute for therapy. I'm a big fan of therapy. I've gone to therapy a lot of my life myself, and it is one of the factors that helped me break out of autopilot mode that I'm not going to really list within those 5 tips. So just make sure that if you are feeling anxious, depressed, or honestly, I think therapy is for everybody, please please, please find a therapist. I know it's not necessarily accessible to everyone, but if it is accessible to you, I highly recommend therapy as well. Sure to stick around to the end because I'm going to share with you a tip that I created that literally takes you maybe 2 to 5 minutes to do. And whenever I feel myself slipping into that mode, I deploy this tactic and I am snapped out of it. So that's at the end. Make sure to stick around till then. The first thing, and I really credit this first tip for initially breaking me out of autopilot mode, and that is to pay attention to your dreams. Now, I know you've heard this before, that paying attention to your dreams is really good, to write them down, but here's why it's so important for breaking out of autopilot mode. Autopilot is a result of only listening to what Martha Beck calls our social self, which is basically the part of us that's kind of molded by society and follows societal cues. Obviously, the social self is very needed. We are social creatures. We need to learn how to live in society, but we also have another side of us called the essential self. Essential self is the true blue part of us, the part that we're kind of born with. I like to think of it as that little kid that lives within us that always knows what we want. But in our society, this is what I was talking about with the way that things are built. The social self can become too loud and it can drown out the little voice of our essential self. And what we're doing when we're paying attention to our dreams, which a lot of times we discount, right? Because they don't make any sense. They're hard to remember. Why are we spending time doing this, right? That's what the social self tells us. Our dreams are communicating to us in the language of the soul and also in the language of our essential self. I like this quote. I always botch who it's from. I think it's Aristotle, that said that the soul doesn't think without a picture. And our dreams are really a portal to our true self. And if you are into Jungian psychology, Jungian vibes, he also believed that it was a portal to the collective unconscious. So paying attention to your dreams is something that we do not understand as people, but what I can tell you as someone who has been paying attention to her dreams for many years is that my dreams have all of the big answers to my life within them. You know, it's kind of annoying when people tell you your dreams, but this is important. I had a dream the other day that I had stolen a koala and a panda from the zoo, and I was so excited to take them home and help them, but I realized that I didn't have enough bamboo because they both exclusively feed on bamboo, I think, right? I realized I didn't have enough bamboo to feed them both, and so I knew the responsible thing was to take the panda back to the zoo and keep the koala because I could feed the koala. This is a super easy one to analyze. Bamboo is obviously a symbol for energy, right? It's food. And the bears, the panda and koala, those are my symbols for projects, for creative energy, for things that I want to do. This was a few weeks ago. I had a lot of projects on my plate, and I was also giving a lot to things like Instagram and TikTok and things like that. I kind of realized, oh, I don't have the bamboo to feed all of these things. I just don't. And I realized that YouTube is my koala. I love it. It's one main thing that I can feed. So from that dream, it helped me come to this realization of, oh, I can't feed the panda, but I can feed the koala. You hear, I'm feeding the koala, and it's really great. I found that this weight lifted off my shoulders. That is because of this dream that I had that helped me come to this realization so much faster than if I had just used my thinking mind to do that. Wondering, okay, I record my dreams. How do I actually analyze them? This is a little bit complicated. I do have a course where I break this down called Trust Your Intuition, but I can say quickly here in this video that typically Googling what each symbol means is not going to work for you because we all have our own individual associations with different ideas and objects. And so the best way that I have found to do this is to think about what your association is with it. So an example would be like, if I dreamed about a football, right, I'm going to not have the best association with a football because I don't like football. But if my husband was to dream about football, it would be a positive association, right? That's what I mean by Googling things is probably not going to matter very much. And the way to see it also is consistent over time. So keeping a dream journal and even just the act of paying attention to it is signaling your subconscious that you are listening, you are paying attention. You're telling your essential self you matter when you write down your dreams. And a lot of times, if you just come back to your dream a day, a week later, it will make sense to you. And you won't have to do all this fancy, interpretations of it. Although I love doing that. I think it's fun. So I do it for my dreams. But a lot of times, if you just come back to it a week later or something like that, it will make perfect sense. Tip number 2 to breaking out of autopilot mode is to orient yourself in space and time. And I find the easiest way to do that is by finding out which year you are in the tarot. I'll tell you what I mean by orienting yourself in space and time. When I was feeling like I was in autopilot and I was working a muggle job, it just felt so boring and heavy. And this was about, I would say, 8 or 9 years ago, something like that. And it just felt like time wasn't real and things were just kind of dragging on. I was in a relationship that wasn't going so well at the time. I just didn't know how to get out of that. And I just felt like it was never going to end. Thinking about getting out of that just felt impossible at the time. And what I found worked was to meet myself where I was at and really see myself zooming out to where I was within my own life cycle. Now, there are a lot of ways to do this. I think astrology is another fabulous way. I am not an astrologer. I am a client of astrology and love astrology, but I can't really do it for myself. As I mentioned, my mom's a professional tarot reader and author, and she introduced me to the book Who Are You in the Tarot by Mary K. Greer. I had the privilege of meeting her. I think she's so fabulous. And her book really helped me see where I was at in my life. What I found out after doing the quick math, it does require some quick math, but I believe in you. What I found out after doing the quick math was that I was in my hangman year. What this meant was that time felt suspended and I was meant to see things from a different perspective because the hangman is upside down. The next year, when I calculated what my next year would be, I realized that it was my death year coming up and that things were going to feel very different soon. Now, you may hear death year, I don't want that. But this actually felt really empowering to me because I knew that this time period that I was in would end and there would be something new. Things that weren't working were going to fall away. There may be some grief. It may be a little bit painful to go through. But on the other side of that, things were going to fall away to make room for new things. And that awareness changed everything for me. You're probably wondering, which year am I in the tarot? Which is what I'd be wondering at this point. It's like you almost have to know, right? If you don't want to calculate it yourself, this is something that I offer to clients inside of readings. It's something I can easily figure out for you and explain to you in your own personal context. But I will link down below a really great blog post by Benebell Wen, who if you haven't seen her work, you will fall down a rabbit hole. She's great. She has a really thorough blog post on how to calculate your tarot year. Also, Mary K. Greer's book, Who Are You in the Tarot, is so great. And it's something that you'll use every year as you go through your different years. You can use her book for that. So those are all things that I recommend. If you don't want to deal with it, if you don't want to figure it out, you can just come to me as one of my clients and I can help you figure out what year you're in addition to other fun things that we do inside of a reading. I'm going to show you how to calculate your tarot year really quickly. If you're not into tarot, then you may need the book or just get a reading with me. It's going to be the easiest way to figure this out. But if you know anything about the tarot, then her article is going to be helpful. So I'll show you using my birthday how to calculate it. So my birthday is on March 28th. And since I've already had my birthday this year, which is 2023, I'm going to add up 3/28/2023. So 3 plus 28 plus 2023 equals 2054. So then you add 2 plus 5 plus 4, which equals 11. 11, depending on the tarot system you use, this is what I mean by it gets a little complex. That totals up to the Justice card. And that makes so much sense. I had that dream about the panda and koala and cutting out certain things, and I'm rebalancing the scales, right? Usually in the Justice year, you kind of come into it with things a little wonkadoodle from your Wheel of Fortune gear, and now you're kind of rebalancing the scales. This is what I mean by how helpful it is, because you're taking the situation you're in, you're able to zoom out and look at it from a different perspective. So instead of me feeling really overwhelmed by all the things that are happening, because I accumulated a lot of really cool stuff in my Wheel of Fortune year, and it is pretty much what it sounds. It's like the game show. You're spinning the wheel. Sometimes you hit bankrupt. Sometimes you hit that $5,000 wheel, right? Lots of cool stuff happened to me in my Wheel of Fortune year, but as a result, I have too many things on my plate now. Being in my Justice year, it helps me look at, okay, it's time to rebalance the scales, and I can look at things from that lens. So things just tend to make sense a lot more quickly. And I find that this helps you escape autopilot mode, because instead of just going day to day, every day's the same, you're able to zoom out and really see yourself. You're able to see where you're at, and you're able to make decisions from a more empowered place of seeing the whole picture, and also knowing that you can take the energy from that year and apply it in a very helpful, productive, and even healing way, so that when you take your next steps forward, you feel centered and you feel like you know what the heck is happening. You want to skip the math and just get a reading with me, here is where you can request your reading, emilyrosedivination.com/offerings. Tip number 3 is really funky, but it seriously changed the way that I see myself. And that is to go into a meditation and say your name out loud a lot of times. What we're doing here is thinking of ourselves in the third person. If you've ever heard somebody talk in the third person, oh my gosh, it's so annoying, right? I was so hesitant to try this, but I was reading a book called The Emerald Tablet. I'll put it here in editing. When I was reading that was a recommendation inside that book. And I did this. I sat there and I said my name, my full name aloud, and I just said it and said it and said it until I felt different than that identity. And this is really, really hard to explain to you, the benefits of this, because it's so experiential. But what I can say is that I felt less attached to the story that I had been telling myself about my life. I felt like at the time my name was Emily Rose Chandler, right? So at the time, I was able to see myself as separate from that. And I saw that there was this human identity, but there's also this spiritual being. And if you're not into spirituality, this is going to sound bananas to you. If you are into spirituality, you probably get what I mean by this. Doing it, you just have to try it and see what happens for you. But it definitely changed my perception, and it for sure broke me out of autopilot mode. Gosh, we only have 2 tips left. And the last one is one that I created, so I'm so excited to share it. I've never, I don't think, shared it with anybody before. Maybe inside of my classes, but I don't think I've shared it anywhere. So I'm excited to tell you about it. Tip number 4 is to either give yourself a reading or get a reading. I am a professional reader, so obviously this is the one I can get behind the absolute most, because this is what I do full time now. So if you do read cards for yourself, this is something you can do for yourself. But what I recommend doing is getting a reading from someone else, whether it's from me or from somebody else. I go to other readers as well. And it doesn't matter how good you are at reading cards, because sometimes we just can't see it for ourselves. And sometimes we need an outside perspective from someone that we trust or someone that we have an inkling is going to get us on that path to help us see what our next step is. And sometimes we need help pulling us out of autopilot mode. It's a lot of emotional labor to do this, and if you don't have the bandwidth at this time, getting a reading is by far the easiest way to break yourself out of that cycle. This is why I absolutely love reading Lenormand cards. If you don't know what they are, they're these kind of sassy to the point cards, and they read like a sentence. And the reason why I love it so much is because we have a signature spread called the Grand Tableau. It's where you lay out literally every single card in the deck, and it's like a life map. And I can see it in my clients' faces. And also when I do Grand Tableaus for myself, it really pulls you out of your autopilot because you're able to visually see your whole life depicted in the cards. And it has this effect of giving you that perspective of seeing, okay, these are all the different pieces of my life. And I kind of describe Lenormand like headlights on a car. If you're the car driving at night, that's your life. You turn on the headlights and you can see what's going on. So instead of just bumping into random things, crashing into random things as you go and then changing course, you can kind of get a heads up, see what's going on. And then you can turn to tarot, or you can turn to, I get visions, to visions that you get and say, okay, what do we want to do with this information now that we have it? And that's the way that I function in readings. A lot of my readings start with a Grand Tableau to get that kind of full picture, and then we turn to advice cards to get a sense of where you want to go. It's like turning to a friend in the car to figure out, okay, let's adjust our travel plans here. Accepting new clients at this time, and you can request a reading here at emilyrosedivination.com/offerings. I am only going to be reading 1, maybe 2 days of the week soon, so my calendar is filling up really fast right now. So if you want to snag a reading, this is the time to do it, to become a client, because probably in the near future I won't be accepting clients, so get in the door while you can. Tip number 4, either give yourself a reading or get a reading to give yourself that zoomed out perspective to see your life from that bird's eye view, and you can kind of see how all the pieces fit together, and you can consciously decide, see how everything is laid out and decide, okay, what do I want to do next? And you can also kind of have a trusted confidant to work with through that process. Okay, we are on to our 5th and final tip for breaking out of autopilot mode, and this is something I created. It is called the whim inventory. Thinking a whim inventory, what the heck? A whim inventory requires you to check in with yourself and figure out what you actually want in the smallest form. With the whim inventory, what you do is you first want to kind of center yourself. You kind of want to close your eyes. I like to put a hand on my belly, a hand on my heart, and I close my eyes and just breathe for, I would say 30 seconds, a minute. It's really not that long. You just kind of breathe in and whatever breathing pattern works for you. And then what you want to do is to let yourself want whatever floats through your mind. You want to note it. So you may need to continue to close your eyes to feel it. But a lot of times what I could do is once I'm in that mode, I just grab a pen and paper and I write down everything that I want, all the whims that come through my head. The trick with the whim inventory is there's absolutely no editing allowed. You can't edit. That's the one rule of the whim inventory. You want to write down everything you want. And some of it might be like outrageous things that you can't have right now, and other things may be like silly things that you're like judging yourself for wanting, but there's no judgment allowed in a whim inventory. I went through one of my journals to find a whim inventory I had done, and I'll list it here. These were the whims that I had that day. And one of my rules with a whim inventory is that you need to do one of them that day. If you can, right that second. And this is so interesting because I feel like this makes life really fun and exciting, right? So obviously, if you look at my whim inventory, a lot of these things were really doable. But I decided that I wanted to take a photo of something that was out of place. And so this was like turning my day into an adventure. Since I had a little bit of time, I decided to go for a walk. And I decided to turn my walk into a little adventure and find something that looked out of place wherever I was. And it became like a fun, childlike scavenger hunt. And it really brought this playfulness and excitement to my day. I'm going to try to find the photo that I took because I did take a picture of the thing that looked very out of place. It was basically like this weird sculpture. Definitely looked out of place and strange, almost like an alien had dropped it down there. What does this have to do with getting out of autopilot? Well, what it does is it helps you actually pay attention to what you want, and it helps you stop editing yourself. What we are doing here is we are reclaiming the power back from our social self, which we need, right? We have a role for that social self. We need that social self, but it's gotten too loud, right? So what we're doing is we're giving a microphone to that little voice, to our essential self, and we're saying, I'm listening. What do you want? And from here, this is where you can really come to this fruitful place of starting to hear what you want. Now, full disclaimer, when you start listening to your essential self, often what it wants is very inconvenient, right? But the thing is the whim inventory, and why I love it so much is because it enables you to hear that essential self in a very inconsequential way. You can just listen to it and say, okay, that's interesting that you want all of these things. But then you get to, your social self, right, gets to pick one of those things to actually pursue that day. So it's a way to not edit yourself, not put a lot of pressure on that essential self. And it's also a way to start honoring it and to start honoring your true self in that moment in time. I know that this process can be a bit daunting of coming out of autopilot because we kind of can see where we're at in our life, and then we see all the changes that we kind of want to start making, and it can feel overwhelming. If you want support on that journey, I am here as your reader. You can request your reading at emilyrosedivination.com/offerings. As I mentioned in the dream part, I am trying to feed the koala and not the big panda. So I have reduced how many days I'm reading, And as a result, I am taking new clients right now, but I probably won't be in the next couple of months. So if you want to sneak in and become a client who always get the first dibs on my calendar, then you can become a client now by requesting your reading, emilyrosedivination.com/offerings. And a lot of folks ask, like, what should I expect in a reading? Do I have to come with questions? And the answer is no, you don't. You don't have to come with questions. A lot of times I just kind of ask why you're requesting the reading, and that's in the little form that you'll fill out. It's really short when you request your reading. And feel free to just brain dump there. You know, you don't have to say a lot, but just saying, like, I feel like I'm an autopilot. I feel frustrated with my job. My relationship is feeling wonky. Whatever it is, you can just write it down. Or even if it's, I don't really have questions, but I know I need some guidance, that's fine too. You can come as you are to a reading, and it's my job. I help you with that emotional labor of figuring out what it is that you truly need in this moment. And that's what I feel like is my gift. I feel like that's why I'm kind of put on the planet, is to help people figure out where they're at in space and time and help them find their next steps forward. Enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. And I just want to say thank you for being here. We just recently hit 1,000 subscribers, and I know in like the YouTube multiverse that's a low number, but it does not feel like a low number to me, because I talk to a lot of you guys. If you comment, I do my very best to respond to every comment. I don't always hit that, but I do read every comment, and I so appreciate all of your support over the years, and I'm just so honored that you're here and honored that you have included me on your spiritual path.